Hey Trails Collective, Ian here, coming at you with another gear review. In this round it is going to be of the Hoka Zinal trail shoe. This is one that launched in July of 2021 and is in their Sky or Mountain inspired lineup. It's one that I was anxiously awaiting since I think first seeing the pre-production model in 2020. My Hoka reps when they were through, knowing what I've liked and not liked about some of the Hoka models and others, thought that I may really like this model, and indeed I have.
In the dark, and I saw you. So then in secret, I felt like the jumper off the bridge, and the water down below will be keeping this, and I will let you too, 'cause I wanna be like the wind, I wanna run with you, we can be wolves, howling at the prey white moon. I wanna be by your side when we light up the sky for the world to see. Run, 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 run with me.
So let's dig in. I am going to start with some of the specs, and then I will take you into the model from the top down, weighing in on some of the not just materials, but maybe how it's gone on my foot. And I will take you through some of the comparisons within Hoka, as well as the comparisons outside of Hoka. Maybe list out a couple of the strengths and weaknesses. All right, let's dig in. Retail price, $160. Stack heights, the insole weighs in at, measures in at 5 millimeters in depth. Lasting inside of the shoe, 2 millimeters. Midsole comes in around 20 millimeters in the hind foot. Lugs are about 4 millimeters for a combined stack of 31 millimeters in the heel and 27 millimeters in the forefoot for a drop of roughly 4 millimeters. One of the things that's Hoka's been printing out on the 2021 models and hopefully going forward is some of the dimensions, and you'll find that on the inside of the midsole. And what they are reflecting are the heel and toe spring measures. That is, the toe spring is the curvature in the front of the shoe, heel spring is the curvature in the rear of the shoe, as well as the volume metric, the amount of room in the shoe. And then the last one on the end is a weight value, in this case expressed in grams. So I think it's pretty cool to be able to look at Hoka's lineup at least and look at them from an apples to apples quick comparison. And it also helps, I think, to tell the story of some of the models a little bit. So one of the other specs, which we wouldn't have had in prior reviews, are the spring measures. So listed toe spring comes in at 32 millimeters, heel at 19 millimeters. My in-house measure using my own caliper. It's a little bit tricky to figure out where Hoka was really measuring the toe spring angle, but I basically took it from a level platform or the table with the uppermost rise kind of above the foremost lug. So Hoka's listed spec was 32 millimeters. My in-house measure was 28. It was a little bit lower. And in the heel, my measure at 19 millimeters matched Hoka's. Women's model comes in with a little bit lower toe spring and heel spring angle of 29 in the toe and 17 millimeters in the heel. That's getting into the weeds, I guess, a little bit. But as I've found, especially this past probably year or so that I've been doing more intentional and deeper dives into gear reviews, the spring angles really do, I think, make a difference in terms of the underfoot feel and how the shoes transition, as well as just how they, I guess, leave particularly my foot and around my metatarsals feeling at the end of the day and after particularly a long run. So I think it does matter, in addition to just kind of being a, I don't know, cool talking point on the shoe. The second metric on here is the volume. Comes in at 490 centimeters cubed. Women's comes in at 381 centimeters cubed. And these are all, it's a men's 9 and a women's 7.5. That won't mean a ton in and of itself, but in our comparisons here in just a minute, maybe we'll flush out where that might be useful. Weight comes in at 8.5 ounces or 242 grams in men's. In-house measure matched with right around 8.5 ounces. Women's 7.5 comes in at 7 ounces or 199 grams. All right, so let's dig in a little bit to the properties of the shoe, starting with the upper. Upper is designed with a really thin, soft, breathable, engineered mesh upper. There's the absence of really any overlays in the vamp. It'll be really tough to probably see it in the camera, but they do in the engineered knit process perforate differently, I suppose, or engineer the mesh to be having a little bit more integrity in some areas and breathability in others, but it really is absent of any overlays in the vamp or in the upper. It has a TPU, a thin TPU toe cap in the front. It has a semi-rigid heel cup in the back, flat laces, and a unpadded tongue rather, with only partial gussets in there. So they would be some of the materials. Let's take you through how it feels on the foot. So some reviewers that I have come across out there feel like there's just too much volume to the upper of the Zinal. For me, I've preferred shoes that have wider toe boxes. Something like the Speed Goat is too tapered and too shallow for my toe. So if somebody's looking to have the shoe really locked down and in, particularly with descents, the Zinal may end up feeling a little roomy or spacious. In addition to the volume, I think what people are also feeling is because there's an absence of overlays here, there's nothing really to maintain the integrity of the fabric. So it tends to just kind of settle in or drape. Upside is it, for those that have maybe a higher volume foot, allows you to push out, but it also allows you to flex with the shoe and also keeps it really light. This TPU toe cap here for abrasion, if you're really going to kick a rock hard or catch it, it's not going to do a ton, but it does help with some of the abrasion. What I do like about it is that it only encapsulates just your toe area. Something like the Torrent 2, which uses a similar TPU material in the front, has a fuller wrap around the upper of the shoe from the outside all the way through to the inside. A lot of brands are using that really thin TPU wrap. The downside to that design is because it wraps all the way around, once the water gets in on a creek crossing, it really locks it in. One of the features that I like about the Zinal is that it's really pinpointed toward the toe, and when you do go through water, the really thin, porous material in the upper really does drain pretty quick. So I think that is a nice attribute of the model. The tongue being really thinly padded, if somebody has a really high instep and really needs to crank down the laces, that may be a bit annoying. They may want a little bit more padding in that tongue. I shouldn't say it's the absence of all padding. There is a thin strip, but there's really not much to it. I think it rests really well, at least around my instep or ankle, that it's really thin. It has a brushed kind of felt inside, which feels, I think, pretty nice. The laces being flat, though, I feel like that does sit down over the instep really well. So even in the absence of padding, it still feels pretty good over the foot. The only partial gussets to the tongue, it may be tough to see that in the camera. There's a gusset on the inside and outside. I think it's more really just to keep the tongue in place so it doesn't drift down to either side. Especially with such a thin tongue, it may be otherwise apt to drift, particularly with descents when you're really pushing out. Downside, though, I think to the partial, though, is if debris is falling inside or of the vamp or above the tongue, if it does slip down in there, it's going to drop right into the shoe. And I have had the experience in this shoe where I do end up with some debris in there. I don't know, it could have been coming in from the around the heel collar, but it also may have just been slipping down in here in the lace perforation. So if they do have a Zinal 2, I'd probably like to encourage them to just fully gusset that tongue. I think it would be a nice addition. Heel cup, otherwise fairly unremarkable. Having a little bit of integrity there does add some stability, or keeping your foot over the base of the shoe at heel strike. Really minimal designed upper, breathes well, drains well. I think it feels pretty good over my foot. Let's take it a step down. The midsole. So the midsole is it's called ProFly for Hoka, and what that is, it's basically a dual density midsole compound. It's designed to be more cushioned in the heel and a little bit firmer in the forefoot or underfoot. When I measure out the durometers, or the midsole foam hardness using a Shore A durometer here, it comes in around 35 in this orange material, and this topper comes in around 20. So that definitely feels softer under the foot and is actually pretty nice. In terms of them conveying ProFly and being dual density, it's supposed to be softer in the heel for a softer heel strike. It's supposed to be firmer under the forefoot to have a more stable and snappier toe off. I can't replicate that with my measures to really confirm that that's the case. So I'm not quite sure on the design of the ProFly, how that actually is in actuality. So I'll have to get with my reps a little bit more to really tease that out, to know whether it's actually a legit thing, or whether it's more marketing and design talk than in actuality. The midsole foam feels really, I think it feels really comfortable out of the box. It has a really soft feel. It has a really flexible chassis to the shoe. And I'll talk about more of the outsole rubber in a second, but when you have this exposed ProFly midsole, which I think is just an EVA compound in here, without the anchoring rubber and without a stiffer shank in here, it offers a lot of flexibility and softness. Feels great out of the box. We've had a lot of people try it on in the store, and rarely does somebody try this shoe on and not like it. So I think it does well there. It's got enough of a stack height to provide some protection over rocks and roots. I don't really have an issue. For those of you who have checked into my gear reviews in the past, you know that I feel like rock plates are overrated. I know that even there might be some areas, maybe if I lived and did all of my running in some really rocky PA area trails, or in the Adirondacks or something, I may want a little bit more underfoot. But I think that speaks more toward the torsion of the shoe in terms of protecting your foot, as it does the actual impact for cushion. I do take them out, and I'll find pointy rocks, and I'll just step right on them. I'll find sapling nubs from branches that are pretty sharp and sticking out, and I'll weave in a clip here where it's basically standing on one of those, and you can feel the compression, but it's really not traumatizing or hurting my foot at all. So whereas some people may want more integrity to the platform, again, I feel like the shoes, as long as they have an adequate stack height, they don't need a rock plate, and I think the Zinal is one. The downside, I think, to the midsole foam compound they're using is I feel like it's packing out or compressing quicker than I'd like it to. I have maybe 100 miles in the shoe or so, and I can feel the indent under my first and second metatarsal on the inside of the shoe already. And again, I just feel like the midsole foam it feels kind of unremarkable in a certain way, and that is in terms of the rebound capacity as well as the durability. But it does give you a light, soft, responsive package. All right, let's move on to the outsole. Outsole configuration, they are using a light Vibram light base mega grip compound configuration. So the light base is marketed as, I think it's 30% lighter and 50% thinner than a traditional Vibram outsole. When you look at this, the outsole rubber is basically recessed into the midsole, and it just is pretty thin. And in addition to it already being thin, it's just spot treatment. So they have their outsole rubber in rhomboid configurations here, or just the shape of those lugs. I think it gives it decent generalized traction, but it's not really that grippy when you get into soft ground or mud. That's just not where it excels. These 4mm lugs feel probably more to me like 2 or 3mm lugs. They ride really well on soft pack, but there's just not that much bite to them. But with the light base, it has the isolated placement in the forefoot, in the higher strike or pull zones, as well as in the heel for contact there. Here it's just exposed midsole. So this has to shave, I don't know, an ounce or two or whatever it is off of the shoe's weight. And it really does add to the flexibility and the torsion of the shoe. So in a basically a distance race ready package here, I think this configuration works for the Zinal. But you just have to be aware that you only have spot traction up here. So if you're looking for full length outsole rubber traction, really technical terrain, this probably isn't going to be the go-to design for you. All right, so they are some of the properties of the shoe. Let's get into, oh, and then the, actually one more thing, I guess let's speak to the geometry. So Hoka's set on basically it's a rocker geometry. As we mentioned before, it's got a certain amount of heel spring in the heel, toe spring in the forefoot, and it's designed to basically accentuate the roll motion of the foot. In the case of the Zinal, they classify this as an early stage meta rocker. And so basically what's supposed to be the case is that the fulcrum of the shoe is supposed to be behind the metatarsals, or right in here. And so somebody should hit it fairly early, and it should feel fairly smooth in the transition. And that's versus something like the Speed Goat, and I think the Torrent, though I'm not sure there, I forgot to look at that, which is a late stage meta rocker. The late stage meta rocker has your fulcrum further forward ahead of the metatarsals, and that's creating or intended to have, be in a model that has a more stable base, and so it keeps the stable base further forward before dropping off. From my vantage point, I've never been a big fan of the late stage meta rocker that's in the Speed Goat. I just feel like and it's in other models. I felt it in the Brooks Caldera. I felt it in the Ultra Olympus. When you get forward in a fairly bulky shoe, when it really drops off and you get that aggressive ramp angle or the toe spring at the front, I just feel like you're kind of dropping it in nothing, and it almost feels more stable, and it feels like it creates a more unstable trigger in the mechanical linkage of the lower leg. On the Zinal, because it drops it back, I guess, earlier, and because the toe spring is a little bit less or it's lower down, this just feels more natural and or naturally more stable to me. In a lightweight, flexible package, it also, I think, has a really smooth transition where I don't even necessarily notice I shouldn't even say necessarily, I don't even notice the meta rocker or the rocker geometry that's in the Hoka. So for those of you who haven't necessarily been a big fan of that feature or cared one way or the other, it may be a decent match in the Zinal for you to check out. All right, so comparisons within the Hoka lineup. Probably the closest one that it would replace would be the Torrent. The Torrent, also a lighter weight package or model, comes in a little bit heavier than the Zinal. It has a little less sticky outsole rubber compound, but more traction through the full foot, and a little bit less volume in the shoe. The Speed Goat, by comparison, just as it's got, and this has a relatively similar stack height in the Torrent to the Zinal. The Speed Goat takes your stack height or midsole foam up about 10 millimeters. So there's just a lot more midsole foam underneath your foot, a lot more integrity to the shoe in terms of torsion as well as the beating that it'll take. And again, you really notice the late stage rocker as opposed to the early stage. So a really different feel in the Speed Goat. Speed Goat also has a little bit more tapered toe, which is a little bit shallower. And paired with a few of the overlays in there, the Zinal just feels like it has more volume. Probably if you were going to go with a hybrid of the two, if you went with like a Speed Goat Evo model, would get a little bit lighter, a little bit more underfoot feel similar to the Zinal, but still being a Speed Goat package. This line of shoes, or kind of this subcategory, probably has closer matches outside of the brand. So, and I've been really excited about the space, being fairly soft, being fairly flexible, and being good for crossing between hard pack and trails. I think is a really good, makes for a pretty versatile shoe. And so some of these you're coming out with, and some even have, where they've classified them as maybe like a Western States 100 racing shoe, where it's got enough cushioning to take long miles, but it's not built to be overly technically capable, so to speak. in the space, some of the comparisons, one would have been is the Scott Kinabalu Ultra RC. Comes in about an ounce heavier than the Zinal. I feel like it has a little bit better wrap in the vamp or in the forefoot. Gets a little bit shallower than what's in the Zinal. So for those who are really after the underfoot feel of the Zinal, the Scott Kinabalu Ultra RC could be one that you could check out. Scott also uses a similar kind of meta rocker design, so it toe springs up. And this otherwise feels like a slipper as well. Outsole rubber is a little bit less sticky in the Ultra RC versus the Vibram Mega Grip here, but both have that shaved off center. So if you get into something where you're packing in mud or on soft ground, both are going to get slick in the mud. Another one might be the Brooks Catamount. Brooks Catamount comes in, I think it's a couple ounces heavier than the Zinal. The upper has more of the TPU wrap all the way around, though it does have a couple perforations on the inside for traction. When I first wore and tested the shoe about a year ago, I felt like it didn't have quite enough stability or hold in the upper for off-camber terrain or pitches. I feel like the Zinal feels a little bit more stable underfoot. Both come in at 160, and this category is also fairly similarly priced. The Ultra RC comes in at 150, Zinal 150, or 160 rather, and the Catamount 150. What the Zinal also has a little bit stickier outsole rubber with the Vibram Mega Grip versus the Trail Tack that Brooks is using. A little bit better durability here as well. Where the pickup is the midsole compound that Brooks is using. It is heavier. They use a nitrogen infused midsole foam, which has a higher rebound capacity and better durability than what's in the Zinal. So if somebody's looking for a crossover shoe or something that's going to go long but not be overly technical, if you're looking for the lightest weight package, it might be the Zinal. But if you're looking for a more durable, more responsive midsole foam, I'd probably go with the Catamount on that one. I'd recently just sent a pair down to a pretty awesome trail runner that I'm supporting down in Virginia. She's pretty incredible. I'm looking forward to what she has ahead. For her, she tends to pack out some of the midsole foams, and so when we were toggling between the two models trying to pin it down, we ended up going with the Catamount over the Zinal. So we were worried that the Zinal would pack out a little bit too quickly in the forefoot for her volume. And then maybe one more in the lineup would be the Salomon Pulsar. Salomon Pulsar is using a bit softer midsole foam blend than what's in the Zinal. It has, though, a little bit more integrity to the chassis. And the outsole rubber, probably not quite as sticky as what Vibram is using. The biggest shape difference is that it has a basically narrower midsole and heel, as well as more tapered and shallower toe, but otherwise set also on a rocker design with pretty aggressive toe and heel springs. The Salomon, if somebody's looking for a narrower, really locked down kind of Euro style fit, or wants something that has a little bit more design, integrity, and advancement, I would go with the Matrix upper. In the Pulsar. Matrix is a beautiful material. It's really durable. It's hydrophilic, so it doesn't hang on to the water. Laces have a really designed lace garage. Heel collar feels really good around the gusset. And the midsole foam that they're using is a bit more durable than what's in the Zinal. This comes in a bit more, though, at $180. And again, you got to be aware that it's just got a pretty narrow silhouette to it. So they would be some of the comparisons. All right, let's take you out with, I guess, some of the weaknesses and strengths of the model. So probably the biggest weakness of this shoe, from my vantage point, is the price tag. Coming in at $160. That just seems a bit excessive for this model. There's not really anything groundbreaking happening from my vantage point. Yes, it uses light bases, which is a little bit newer for the Vibram, but really light bases, even less material there, so it could probably kind of be cheaper. There's nothing too dramatic going on. It's engineered mesh, which is nice, but there's nothing like the use of matrix or other advanced fabrics or fibers in the upper. Nothing really remarkable with the heel collar. From my vantage point, this should really probably be $120, $130 shoe, and that's what it has the durability of. I see that as its biggest weakness. Midsole durability would be number 2. Again, I feel like this midsole compound is just packing out a little quicker than I'd like. And then number 3, at least comparing it to others in the Hoka lineup, would be protection. I know some people feel like they really want more of a beater or bomber shoe underfoot if you're going with Hoka, and this just isn't that shoe. I think if you were to try to give it more protection, more beef, it just wouldn't be the Zinal, and I think you kind of take away some of the strengths of the model. All right, strengths. Really excellent out-of-the-box feel. It's very light, nimble, has a really sticky outsole and a really minimal design, and it has great volume in the upper. So for designing a, I don't know, whether it be like a UTMB shoe or again a Western States 100 shoe, it really does feel great. It's really versatile, crossing between hardpack and trails. The outsole Mega Grip allows you to still have decent stickiness and traction over variable surfaces. It holds really well on off-camber surfaces, and that's really critical. That piece is probably one of the biggest strengths. So one of my long-term, I guess, gripes with Hoka, and particularly something like the Speed Goat, is that high stack height. So at least for East Coast terrain, when we're particularly descending, if I'm getting into root networks or 90-degree turns, I really need to know where my feet are, and I need to ensure that my foot is going to be held over the base, and if I do go, then I'm going to be able to catch it before going over a cliff. For all those reasons, I've not been a fan of the Speed Goat. Historically, my favorite shoe in Hoka rather was this Evo Jaws, just because in some ways it wasn't a Hoka. It didn't have that high stack height. And so really, that's what I feel like I need in the shoe to have a fairly stable base for Beast Coast trail running. And that's really what the Zinal provides. Overall, I really like the shoe. Again, it does have some weaknesses, but I would not hesitate to recommend this for somebody looking for a lightweight, nimble, responsive, race-ready package. Nice work on that Hoka, and I look forward to a number of more miles in it. All right, so any questions, leave them in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking our channel. Thanks for liking this video. And I really appreciate you sharing it in your own networks. All right, till next time, see ya.